walk into
Okay.
this.
So thank you all for coming. We really look forward and like the great turnout. Feel free anytime to get up, to grab food and more coffee. Bathrooms are also like just down this hallway to the right if you need to find a bathroom. But let's dive in because there's a lot to cover in this class today. So this class is held by the Columbia County Small Business Development Center, which offers free one-on-one confidential business advising. So if you've never met with our advisors, one of them is right there, Mark. And then we also have Jason, and we just recently added 2 more advisors to our team. Carl, who has an operational background, and Jasmine, who does out in class tonight, she does food and agriculture and food cottage lawn kind of thing. So we're excited to keep building our team. We're the newest center of Oregon, the only one unaffiliated with community college and instead hosted by the Columbia Economic Team. So we're pretty unique in the state, and we're the 20th center. So there's centers all across the state and in the nation that are at SBDC. So if you'd ever like confidential business advising, you can find us on the webs or scan that QR code, which is also at the end of the presentation. But without further ado, Megan, and a quick intro.
Really quick. Thank you so much to the SBDC and Columbia Economic Team for reaching out to Wanted Credit Union to see if we could be a sponsor of the Munch and Learns. And so this partnership started in Q4 of last year. And I saw, and the credit union saw great value to be able to engage with businesses. Really, this kind of speaks to the heart and the mission of Wanted Credit Union is we want our communities to thrive, and how we can help support them thrive and do well is through education. So this really ties in quite nicely. Wanted Credit Union is a full service financial institution. It is not a bank, it's a credit union, but we offer everything that banks have to offer, with the exception that our products are usually and are a better fit for the small business community. There's been a lot of chatter in the last like 6 months because we've changed some of our products. We now offer a free business checking, where a lot of other financial institutions in Columbia County do not. So I'm here to connect and engage with all of you and to be a support. So thank you again for having us as a sponsor.
Yeah, Megan is awesome. We really appreciate Wanted Credit Union's support of this series. Is how we get the free food and the free coffee. So thank you. I'd also like to introduce Natalie. So some of you maybe have never been in BCC OMIC and took a step into the frame of the camera for
Yes.
Could you talk a little bit about what BCC OMIC is and what this building is about?
Of course. So BCC OMIC, we're obviously part of Portland Community College, but we're also part of the OMIC family, if you will. That's OMIC R&D and BCC OMIC. We are here to help with advanced manufacturing. We are here to work with our local community and do training, on the job training, as well as classes here in the building. We're also here as a community space, obviously, for you guys to come in here and work with us. But yeah, our main goal is to work with our local industry partners to get to figure out what they need when they have new employees coming in. What kind of training skills do they need? We do all the training here, get them ready, and then it helps students get into the advanced manufacturing industry quickly easily. So yeah. And like I said too, we're also here as like part of the community. So like there's lots of spaces, area for you to rent. We're also going to be holding events here. So we'll have obviously manufacturing day, but we're also working with the Highway 30 cruisers, and they're going to have a big shining show here in September. So like I said, it's not just about the school part of it. It's also about, being present in the community. So
yeah, and then you also have the Fab Lab.
We do. So we also have the Fab Lab. Thank you. We also have the Fab Lab. That is ran by Sarah Burns, and we will do a robotics class, Lego robotics classes. We also have open Fab Lab time, so people can come in and check out the 3D printers, do classes. We have t-shirt making. So yeah, there's lots of fun events coming up. There's actually going to be one right before the 4th of July where you can come in and, do a couple different activities and really get younger kids exposure to these kind of new technologies that are present in the advanced manufacturing field. So yeah.
BCC OMIC is awesome and great partner. So thank you, Natalie.
Thank you.
So without further ado, I will present our speaker, Andi.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. I'm Andi Costello. You can just flip to the next slide. She modified my slide, so I'm not exactly sure of the order. I'm honored to be here and talk to you this morning. about commercial real estate. I'm a commercial real estate broker, been in the business for 5 years. I've been, thank you, investing in real estate since 2011. I was lucky enough to be in Arizona at the time. So there was a lot of opportunity to get into investing with all the short sales and foreclosures that were happening in that market. And before I got into this business, I spent 15 years in local government. So I have a sweet spot for people that work in government or are committed to giving back to their communities, because without, government funding and partnerships, these kinds of events couldn't happen. So I'm really excited to be here and talk you through the process, because before I got into this industry, I had no idea about commercial real estate. It is so different than residential. And when people want to talk to me about finding deals and how things happen, the market is it's different and people don't talk about it. So I started teaching classes online during COVID because I had so many people calling me and they didn't understand the process because nobody talks about it. It's kind of like this secret society. So I'm hoping to pull back the curtain today a little bit. Next slide.
And also one thing I forgot to do really quick, could we go around the room and have everyone introduce themselves and their business? Start with it over here.
Okay.
Just as a happy fight.
My name's Trina Spang. My husband and I own Portrait Homes Northwest. We're a general contracting company and we build custom homes, remodels, and small commercial jobs, tenant improvements.
Darcy McDonald, I own Brown Butter Bakery.
Blake Bertram here with Summers Financial Management. And so we help our clients just with their financial needs, retirement planning, but also sometimes with business. We give business advice. We like to have referrals. We thought, hey, it'd be great to come here, find out what you're doing, and maybe connect some of our clients who have these needs in commercial real estate with you. And plus our lease is up next year, so maybe we'll learn something.
I'm Kayla Mixer. I have a Pure Serenity Health Spa in St. Helens, Oregon.
I'm Katie Clem. I am Comfort Makers, which is an in-home care agency for seniors. Take care of them at home.
I'm Mindy Sass. I own Northwest Plumbing Services in Sass at Home. I also recently purchased Oregon Hill, and we did a land purchase and a business purchase in the same two separate transactions, but I'll just,
I'm Mark Newton with SBDC, and my daughter-in-law sells you eggs. Yes.
Elsie's.
My name is Matt Cobb. I'm co-owner of Texaco Cleaning, Restoration and Construction. We do carpet cleaning, tile grout cleaning, and we also do some water restoration and just general contracting here in Scottsdale.
Art Radhorn, owns property here locally. Chris Eggers, I have Eggers Equipment Rental here in Scottsdale.
My name is Tyler Tolles. I'm an intern with SBDC. I manage social media department.
And last year, I don't know if I introduced myself, but I work with the SBDC and the Columbia Economic team.
And then how many folks do we have online? You want them to introduce themselves?
Yeah, for the folks online, if you guys can unmute and introduce yourself if you happen to not be working on something right now.
Hi, my name is April and I own Yoga Union in St. Helens. Just here to learn.
Thank you. Tara. And Shauna, this is an opportunity.
Okay. All right. Well, hello, online people.
Yes.
We're glad you're here too. Just full disclosure, I'm not a CPA. I don't provide legal or tax advice. I always advise my clients to talk to an attorney to review their lease, even though I always do that as part of my services, but I'm not licensed attorney, but I know a lot of things and sometimes act like one. So we're gonna talk first up about leasing commercial real estate. I usually do these in 2 30-minute classes on leasing and purchasing. And then when we were talking about the structure today, she's like, well, can you just do both? So I'm gonna cram in a lot of information today. And I do have my cards, so if you, afterwards, if we don't have time, I'm always happy to take a call or, we can chat some more. So we're gonna talk about what leases are, what they might mean. You might see them when you're looking at spaces, so you can kind of understand some of the language, some questions that come up, things that kind of people stumble over and maybe they don't understand. what the process looks like, so it's not such a mystery. And then we're obviously gonna talk about some owner occupied purchases, not so much on the investing side today. Let's see if that'll work. Okay, so I was gonna ask, if you can, I'm gonna read out the letters and then you're just gonna raise your hands as it pertains. So for folks in the room, and I think I can sort of see online, is this your first lease that we be doing? Okay. Would it be an expansion? Is that somebody looking to open in a second location at all? Okay. Are you shrinking to a smaller location? Like maybe you're in 1,500 square feet and you only need 500? No? Okay. Is somebody gonna be going through a lease renewal soon? Your first time? Okay, soon. You're here for professional knowledge, or you're just curious. Is that everybody else? You just don't know, or other reasons you're all here? Okay, cool. All right, so we're gonna talk a little bit about lease structures. There's three main type of lease structures for commercial real estate. So when you go rent an apartment, they tell you the lease rate is $2,000, you know, maybe you have some utilities in there, maybe not, but depending if it's an apartment, generally everything's included and that's your rate. When it comes to commercial leasing, there are so many ways that landlords make money with their tenants, that as a tenant, you need to be very aware of when you are signing a lease, you need to read it and understand. So when you are looking maybe online at LoopNet, you would see a lease listed at $30 a square foot in parentheses FS, and that means full service. So this includes your base rent and most of the time, all of your operating expenses, including utilities. It might include the janitorial in the building. However, there are full service leases that also have operating expenses included. And I actually just reached out to a landlord yesterday. Their lease rate was $24 a square foot a year, plus $10.16 a year for operating expenses, but it's advertised as a full service lease. So that means it's really $34.16 a year per square foot. So you really need to make sure you read the leases and you're working with somebody that's asking the right questions, because just because it's full service doesn't mean that's the only amount you're gonna owe the landlord. The second type of lease is a modified gross lease. This is typically like in a building where maybe you have a shared bathroom, but your utilities are separate. So you as the tenant are gonna pay for the utilities, and as part of your lease, you might have the shared restroom, or maybe there's a shared water meter, so you're gonna pay your own electric, but like the water meter is the same, so you're gonna have an extra expense of paying a percentage of the water bill. And then there's a triple net lease, and this is generally retail spaces where you have your flat lease rate, $15 a year a square foot is how they're listed. And then the triple net. So what the triple nets are gonna include are your property management that the landlord's paying for, your insurance, the taxes, anything related to that property is gonna get billed back to the tenant as a percentage of the space that you're occupying in that building. So for example, here you have this beautiful parking lot, so they go resurface it, the irrigation water, all the lighting. If there were all these tenants in here, depending on your size and percentage of the building, you're gonna be paying for a portion of this parking lot maintenance and everything that goes into that, you know. So you need to make sure that you understand. Sometimes I forget and I get ahead. So triple nets, this includes like anything related to the property. So the landlord's billing all of this back to the tenants. So you might look at something and you're like, wow, that lease rate is really good. It's only, you know, $2,000 a month for my rent, but you really need to understand the triple nets, because you know that now can make your lease $3,500 a month because they have all these expenses. And the triple nets are really calculated based on what the landlord decides that they want to do. So if they're gonna re-roof the building, they're gonna resurface the parking lot, depending on how they do their finances and their accounting, that could either be sort of front loaded into your lease, that can be spent over the life of that. So you as the tenant have the ability to look at the financial statements, but you know, sometimes it can be a crapshoot because you know, you don't always know what the landlord's gonna be doing or when they're gonna be doing it, so you could hit with a bill. And at the end of the year, when the landlord does a reconciliation, if your triple nets are short or over, you know they're gonna come back to you for more money, or if they're over, they'll just credit you on the next year. So that's an expense that as a tenant, you kind of need to be thinking like, okay, I need to maybe set some money aside, case of Murphy's Law, when they come looking for more money. So these are all the types of things that could be included in those triple nets. And again, every landlord operates their building differently. Landlords are businesses, so just like you operate your businesses different than your competitors, all landlords operate their businesses differently. Sometimes when you're reading a lease, it might say that in a triple net lease, you are responsible for the HVAC, right? So the air conditioning goes out, you are responsible for that. Some leases, the landlord takes that on. So again, I've always emphasized the importance of reading a lease and either trying to negotiate something or asking for it. I did a lease last year with a client where the HVAC had reached its useful life, was still working. And so they were really concerned. They were signing a 5-year lease and they're like, why are we gonna spend $20,000 for a new HVAC system for a 5-year lease? So we negotiated with the landlord that if it did have to be replaced, they were only gonna pay for like whatever that life that they were gonna be in there. So they were gonna amortize it. They would only make, it happened in year 3, they were only gonna pay 2 years of that air conditioning unit. So you just need to really make sure that you're protecting yourself because you don't really want any, we have enough surprises in business. Don't want any more, right? So when it comes to finding a space, you might find a space that looks great, but it needs some work. You need some walls put up, walls taken down, an extra bathroom. The bathroom is an ADA, numerous things. Landlords do not consider your improvements needed to operate your business as a benefit to them. So when people are like, but Andi, I'm doing this for them. No, they don't care. You're doing it for you. If you don't do it, you can't operate your business. So very few landlords actually think what you're doing to operate your business is a benefit to them. I mean, that's just the way it is. So when it comes to tenant improvements, they are gonna, if you ask a landlord and say, hey, I want $10,000 to do XYZ, this is all a negotiation. And so this is why it's really important that whether it's me or somebody else, that you work with somebody that understands what's happening in the market. Because when I see people negotiating their own leases, they don't know that sometimes you can get free rent. They don't know that they can ask for land. So they're just signing a lease and saying, great. And the landlord's just like, this is awesome. You know, I didn't have to pay a broker and they didn't know they could ask me for anything. So they're getting away, you know, really good. And that's not always obviously in your best interest as a business owner. But when you're asking for those tenant improvements, when you're saying, hey, landlord, can you either do the work yourself or can you do it for me or give me some money? They are gonna consider, you know, what's the rent, when is the rent gonna start? They're gonna look at your credit worthiness, how much money you have in the bank. And so they're gonna consider all that. But when it comes to finding a space, if it's not what you need, that's a conversation that you should, you know, be having with the landlord. Can they help you? Or, you know, are you gonna take that out of pocket? And then I was talking to a client yesterday, they want to lease a space that is not currently a restaurant for a pizza restaurant. It's gonna cost them $200,000. They're like, Andi, we only want a 3-year lease. And I'm like, what, why? Why do you want to, you're gonna spend $200,000 to put this restaurant in there and in 3 years he could raise the rent, and why would you do that? And they're like, well, we want to go buy something. And I'm like, well, then maybe you should think about buying instead of leasing, because it's not in your best interest to spend that kind of money on something that has no value to the landlord, really. I mean, yeah, you could put another restaurant in there, but maybe somebody else is gonna come in and open a financial services company and they don't need the pizza ovens. So no benefit to the landlord, even though you might think I'm doing this for them. Because when it comes to the value of a building, and we'll talk about that, the value in a building is based on the leases. So an empty building doesn't have no value, it has some value, not the full value of a building that's fully leased at market rate. That's how it's valued by the banks and appraisers. So, you know, it's in a landlord's interest to make sure that their spaces stay full, but it doesn't mean that they're gonna give it away either. Because when people are like, that's been vacant for 3 years, they should give it to me for like free. They're not gonna do that because it lowers the value of their building. They want to lease it for market rate, and they would rather give you some free rent or tenant improvements because it maintains the value of their building. It's like during COVID, people, like hotels, you know, they were giving discounts on their room rate. So a $200 room was maybe $125. Did you notice as soon as COVID was over, those room rates weren't right back? They didn't permanently lower the room rates. They were just like, we're gonna give you 20% off a room or something like that, because it was easier to give you a discount so they could go back to the full price once they were full. So when you're looking at a space and you're negotiating with the landlord, you wanna make sure that your lease has the ability to audit those triple nets. Like you wanna be able to look at them to see like, what's the landlord spending your money on? You know, if they told you that, if it says in there that you're getting billed for a roof, when was that roof done? Did it get done? So that you make sure you understand where your money's going, because you know, you're writing all these checks, kind of wanna see what's happening with that. When it comes to a lease, you might see different numbers. It might be listed at 1,500 square feet that you're gonna lease, but your lease rate's based on 1,700 square feet. And that's because when we look at this room, it's maybe 100 square feet of usable square footage where we can put all the furniture. But when landlords measure what is available for rent, they're measuring to the exterior wall. And that rentable square footage also might include a percentage of the restroom if you have like a shared restroom area. So you just wanna make sure that you understand that. I've had clients like go in and measure and they tell me it's wrong, and I'm like, this is how they come up with the number. So you just wanna understand that. And then you should also consider your lease execution date when you sign is not always your commencement date. So you could sign something July 1 that you're committing to the space, but the lease isn't gonna start till September 1st. So that means you're deferring your rent payments, you're committed to the space, but maybe you need to get permits for the space, or your lease isn't up, so you can't afford to have 2 spaces at one time. So you just wanna, these are things that you can negotiate and or that you should understand as part of the process. So some of the things that get businesses in trouble that I have seen is you're either doing it yourself or your broker doesn't understand what's allowed in a zone for your zoning. So you are a retail business and maybe you're trying to operate in an industrial park. And maybe the county or city zoning code does not allow that. And some cities and counties are less friendly about that. So you want to make sure that your business and the zoning can operate there, because you don't want to find out that you opened your manufacturing business in a retail location that's not permitted, because the government can come and shut you down. And I know clients that that's happened to. They opened a jujitsu studio somewhere that wasn't zoned for that. And so you just want to be careful that you don't get stuck. And then not understanding your long-term plan for your business. So you're signing a 5-year lease and you have not given it too much thought, or maybe the growth happens faster. But when you sign a 5-year lease, you are signing a personal guarantee, which means you're saying to the landlord, I am committing to pay you for 5 years. And if you go out of business, file bankruptcy, you grow too fast, you need a new location, you still owe that landlord that rent unless you can have the ability in your lease to sublease out the space where you can find a new tenant. But oftentimes finding a tenant can still take a while. So you can't always assume that I've had space on the market for 3 years looking for a tenant as a subtenant. So it can take a long time. So you just also want to make sure that you're thinking about your business, like, is this really going to work with your own growth plans and what you see happening? And then timing. Leasing can take a really, really long time. People think things happen really fast. You're getting financing, you're getting SBA financing, conventional financing. It takes a long time. You buy a house, generally in 30 days, that loan's approved. Easy peasy, you're ready to get into your house. When it comes to commercial, it can be much longer, and even though the market's a little slower, I mean, nobody seems to be in a hurry. So you're like, hey, I'm in a hurry. The bank tells you you're gonna get approved in 30 days, or maybe you're not getting them all the information. So you can't always blame the bank, but you're a busy business owner. You're not getting them that last document, and so they can't do what they need to do until you give them the information. So really emphasize, like, make sure you have enough time, especially like over holidays, things really slow down. Contractors aren't working. Contractors, are like, they're taking time off. And so you're thinking like, oh, I can be in this new space in 30 days. Well, you have to go get the lease signed, you have to go pull permits maybe for your tenant improvements, you gotta get the contractor, you gotta get the loan. All of those things can take a long time. And you can sign a lease and not be opening your business for 8 months. And so you have to have that runway, not only for time, but for money. And then when it comes to renewals, also making sure that you leave enough time that, let's say your lease is coming up and you're reading your lease and you tell your landlord, give them whatever notice says in your lease you wanna renew. But maybe there's no lease rate in there. And so they're like, well, I'm gonna move you to market. And now that's way more expensive than you wanted to pay. So you also need the time now to go find a new space if you don't wanna stay there. So just making sure that you give yourself plenty of time. Commercial landlords typically do not do month to month. So if your lease is up, they're gonna make you sign or want you to sign another 3 or 5 year lease or whatever. And so you just need to make sure you leave yourself enough time. I tell people, like, when you're renting an apartment and let's say you're house hunting and you don't find the house, it's easy to just be like, I'm just gonna stay here another year, it's fine, you sign it. As a business, you're really making a long-term commitment to the landlord. And so you just really need to be thinking about what your business is doing now and where it's gonna be in 3 and 5 years, because, if you outgrow the space or your business contracts, you just wanna make sure, you've got the money in the bank to take care of your financial commitments. And then just how expensive everything is. I talk to restaurant owners and they're like, I want to open a restaurant. And I say, well, how much money do you have? And they tell me $5,000. And I tell them, I can't help them. You need $200,000. I mean, literally, unless you're moving into an existing space that has all the equipment, you know, if you're literally gonna gut something and build a restaurant space, it's very, very expensive. Tenant improvements, $50,000 really doesn't do a whole lot in tenant improvements. You know, contractors generally charge a premium to do commercial work. The permits are more expensive, you know, and so you just need to make sure that you understand like how much things are gonna cost. Because it's not always the same as like, well, I have a buddy who does electrical work. Well, the landlord's gonna wanna make sure you're using somebody licensed, bonded, you know, that's getting permits and that you're not just doing the work yourself, right? You know, maybe painting they would allow, but generally landlords wanna know that you're doing everything on the up and up. So, you know, it's easy to do work at home without pulling permits and things if you're handy, but in commercial, it's a little harder to do. So you just wanna understand that you've got the money for the tenant improvements, the moving, the, you know, just your ongoing expenses of taking on, you know, a new space. I bought a commercial building last year and to move my office into, and, you know, as much as I talk about this stuff and I live and breathe, it's like, oh, I didn't think we needed a pest control guy. And then, you know, we got a dead rat in the wall. And then it's like, oh, we gotta cut out, you know, I mean, it's just like all these things is kind of like Murphy's Law, just like at home, you know, maybe you're not expecting. But then it happens in the commercial world and everybody's just like, well, I can charge you more because you're a business. So even the best laid plans, you don't always know. So some of the things to think about if you're looking at leasing space or moving and negotiating is like, who has leverage in the market? And, you know, whether you as a tenant or the landlord, and I would say generally a lot of times the landlords have the most leverage because they have the most money and they can wait for the perfect tenant. They don't have to lease something out. If they don't like your use, they don't have to say yes. I had a church client, it was referred to me by a realtor and the landlord said no. And the agent was like, that's discrimination. How can they not lease to a church? And I'm like, well, there's not enough parking. Oh, okay. I'm like, well, there's other tenants in there. Like the landlord has to be considerate of like your church. You're gonna have all these people there and evening things and there's other businesses. So like landlords can hold the cards and decide whether they want a use or not. And you know, I'd like to think it has nothing to do with discrimination about what you're doing. But I mean, you know, you have to think about the logistics. Is this gonna work and be compatible maybe with your neighbors and what's happening there? You know, and then what's your time frame? I tell people like if your lease is up in 18 months, you should probably think about what you're doing because everything takes time, the lease negotiations, the move, the permits and all of that. One of the things that I always tell people to make sure in your lease is that it gives you the ability to sublease your space. Let's say you're growing and you need to find another space. You wanna make sure that if you could find another tenant to take over your lease and pay those payments, then you can do that so you're not holding the bag on both. Not every lease allows that, so if it doesn't, you wanna make sure you're negotiating the right to do that. And then you need to read the lease. I have so many people that just wanna sign it. When I do work with my clients, I always put comments in my PDF, like read this, make sure you understand what you're signing. Because unless you're Nike or Amazon, you are signing a personal guarantee on your lease. So you go out of business, something happens, you have to move, they can come after you for the money. So you need to understand you're making a 5-year commitment or 3-year commitment or whatever that is to that total amount of the lease. And so you just wanna make sure that you really know what you're signing. A lot of people don't understand that. And then I already talked about the triple nets. And then what does the landlord want? Because sometimes, you know, the landlords are like, hey, I'm really trying to revitalize this part of town or like this side of my building, or I want a tenant that's gonna bring more walkable, you know, users that are gonna walk. And so you kind of just also want to think about like, maybe what do they want? Like, what kind of tenant, would I be a good fit there? Is there competition there? I have a lot of people tell me that they don't want to be next to like one of their competitors and I'm right next to another real estate office and I don't really care. I mean, like, I feel like if you want to go there, you can go there. You want to come to me, people will be like, but there's a tattoo shop there and I'm a tattoo person. And I'm like, but you do tribal art and like, maybe they don't do tribal art. So like, to me, that's, I don't know. I feel like the pie is big enough for all of us business owners. You want to work the businesses there. So this is another quick poll, and I think I kind of maybe got some answers. We've got some retail. Oh, I don't know if you consider it restaurant retail-ish. Office user. We kind of had some industrial users with the contractors. So I kind of answered my own question who was in here. So earlier I was talking about $20 a square foot, $26 a square foot. And so people will ask me, what does that actually mean? And how does that translate to doing my monthly rent? So this is how it is. You're gonna see it listed as cost per square foot. So let's say we found a space, it's 1,200 square feet you wanna lease, and it's $20 a square foot. So this is how much you're gonna owe over the course of the year, of course, not including triple nets. Triple nets are rarely ever actually posted, I always have to call them those. So it's gonna be $2,000 a month in your base rent, that's how you calculate that. So then, you have to look at your triple nets, make sure you understand that. Let's say the landlord tells you for this space, it's $2 a square foot, $2.50 a square foot a year. Per square foot, that's how much you're gonna pay. Times your 1,200 square feet is $300, and $3,000 for your annual triple nets. So then when you do the math, it's $250 a month. So I wanna know what's my total net, this is what I'd be paying to lease this space, $22.50 a month, right? And again, the triple nets can go up, you will always have annual increases in your leases. I always write my letters of intent at 3%, I'm starting to see them as high as 7, your annual increases. So, you know, again, make sure you understand what that means. I've had people tell me, well, I only wanna pay 2, well, great, that's, the landlord's not gonna take that, so. 3, if we're lucky, 5 to 7 is kind of becoming more common. But this is really important, it's kind of like the secret of the industry is that, like, I don't know why we can't just tell you what it is a month. Yes, sir.
5 to 7 per year or?
Per year, 3 to 7% increase per year on.
And in the contract, do they have to state?
Yes.
For, say the contract's 3 years, it's like, this is it
Per
for
year.
all 3, okay.
Yeah, it'll say 3% per year, and then I've seen it where, yeah, and this is why I also encourage people to look at longer leases, because once your lease comes up, not every lease will tell you at that renewal what that increase is gonna be. So let's say now you're under market, or the landlord doesn't want you there anymore, you know, and they raise the rent on you, now you have to decide, am I gonna move or am I gonna stay? So if you kind of feel like your business is pretty stable, and you think you're gonna like where you are, a 5-year lease kind of protects you, especially if you're like at 3%, right? Now, not every landlord's gonna wanna be at 7%, because they also have to be sensitive to the market, right? You sign a lease, they also don't want you to move out. So there's a little bit of like, you know, room there, but yes, anywhere from 3 to 7%.
How do you know like what the market square foot amount is as like a landlord?
Oh, as a landlord,
Yeah.
you work with a broker, or you pay for software that will tell you what's happening in the market. I pay $3,000 a month for commercial software that tells me like different markets and for every asset class. So like an industrial rate, lease rate is not gonna be the same as retail, and it's not gonna be the same as an office space. And also it depends, like, you know, obviously downtown Portland, we all know nobody wants to be there in office space. Even retail, I was just down there driving for dollars this week, looking at all the vacancies for the retail spaces. So there is different lease rates depending on what's happening in the market. And right now, like for office, everybody's flooding to the suburbs because nobody wants to be in downtown Portland. Over time, I think, of course, that'll change, but it's looking at the analytics. So you as a consumer, you know, in residential, you can look at Zillow, you can see there really isn't a whole lot out there from a commercial perspective on what's going on in the market. You know, maybe the SBDC might have some information, but I use a system called CoStar, which owns LoopNet and apartments.com and I think home.com. Anyway, I pay for a lot of money for analytical data that tells me that I can advise people whether they're in market or not. But anyway, this is really important because you know, otherwise the number doesn't mean anything to you if you see it listed at $12 a square foot or something. So I talked about personal guarantee, but when you do get your renewal or you get that lease, please read it. And if you don't want to have an attorney read it, at least make sure you understand what you're signing. You know, or pay somebody for a couple hours of their time to read it and make sure you know what you're signing. It's really, really important. So sometimes clients were, yes, sir.
So what is the personal guarantee? You had that up there on that last slide.
Yeah, so a personal guarantee is when you sign a lease, you are committing that you're gonna pay that term of your lease that you signed, you're committing to pay that whole time. And if you go out of business, you decide not to pay anymore, they can sue you personally for your remainder of the lease rate. Unless you're a huge company like Nike and Amazon, where like, you know, they are on the lease, small business, it's always the owner or whoever is guaranteeing that note, basically, that you are gonna pay.
So they can sue you personally, even if you're like a limited liability.
Yeah, because the lease is actually in your name. Most landlords will not, like, it'll say Andi Costello, DBA, Venture Commercial Real Estate, but it's my name on the lease and they can come after me for the money. So, that's why, you know, when people are like, well, I want to put it in an LLC. Yeah, okay, well, great, landlord doesn't care. They're still gonna come after you for the money. So sometimes we're negotiating and the landlord's responses to our letter of intent that we're writing to make an offer on a space is not great. They don't seem like they're people that you wanna work with. And I tell people, if your lease negotiations, when you start initial conversations are not good, it's never gonna get any better, right? You have a customer come into your business and they're ranting and raving, they're angry, they did this, like, it's not gonna get any better in your next interaction, most likely. So it's the same way with leasing space. If you don't get good vibes, and sometimes I don't know how to explain that to you, or I will tell a client like, hey, how this landlord's responding is not really typical, or I don't think that this is like an appropriate response for the market. I'll tell people like, I personally would not sign this lease, but you can do whatever you want, because this is who you're gonna be working with. And if they're difficult now, they're gonna be difficult in the future. That's not gonna change, so just be aware of that. And then oftentimes people will ask me, when do you have triple nets? When's it a modified gross? And when is it a full service lease? So typically, triple nets are retail spaces, industrial spaces. It can be a standalone office building might have triple nets. And so those are kind of the broad categories. A modified gross maybe is a building where like the things aren't metered separately. And so they're kind of putting some costs in, or maybe they're paying for janitorial, so they're gonna like bill you back for that because the owner wants to make sure it's maintained a certain way. And then our full service lease is generally office space, generally. But then, as I mentioned, sometimes they have operating expenses, which to me, I'm like, then why don't we call it a triple net lease? Call it what it is, which is you're still charging the tenants for stuff. So that's why I tell people, bless you, just read the leases, because landlords are a business and they want to charge their tenants for everything. So, and as a landlord, I understand it, I want my money too. But again, as a tenant, from the tenant side, just make sure, please, that you understand what you're signing and the cost. So I've had people, especially during COVID, ask me, I can't operate my business, I'm not making any money, like, how do I get out of my lease? Yeah, your lease is your lease. Now, maybe your landlord's nice, we'll give you some rent abatement, or, you know, like let you get your PPP loan, but like, there is no landlord tenant law for commercial. Yes, sir.
Well, look, I own some national chains and they're changing that. There's some wording in there. And I had Starbucks try to come after me and I said, no way. And they backed off, but then a couple of the others
Are doing it.
I've seen some new leases that have some, I can't remember what the verbiage is, but that's what
It's
it
like
is.
acts of God or maybe
Yeah,
something like that.
yeah,
or-
it's a different word, but it's like, I had to Google it and I was like, I see what they're doing.
Yeah, so I mean, and that's a national chain, and so they're obviously very sophisticated. You know, I do not write leases as a commercial broker. I use a form that's written by attorneys called the commercial area broker form, and so those forms do not have that yet. And I've had clients ask, I mean, we can always ask the landlord, like, hey, I was a gym and I got shut down. No guarantee the landlord's gonna say yes, but there is no landlord tenant law, right? In Oregon and Washington, there's a lot of protections for residential tenants. Commercial, you have, just act like you have no protection. Just act like you have no protection if something happens. So you're now like, this is awesome, I wanna go do something, what do? I don't know where to go from here. So look at your finances, talk to your commercial lender, make sure that you understand like what are your 3 to 5 year projections. Do you have the money? Do you expect to have the money? Because you just don't wanna be stuck in a position where you're like, I can't pay my rent, right? Nobody wants to be in that situation. And then same thing about like your 3 to 5 year plan. What size, what type, where do you wanna be? Where do you see your business going? So that again, when you're signing a 5-year lease, you're like, cool, I can grow into this space, it's gonna be enough. Or if I'm growing so much, I can open another location. Again, I'm always biased because I'm in the industry, but whether it's me or somebody else, work with the commercial broker, work 99% of the time, I'm compensated by the landlord. So I tell people, yes, you're paying for it over the term of your lease, but it's not directly out of your pocket to have your own representation. If you call on the sign of a broker, they represent the landlord. And so when they're doing dual representation, they're working for the landlord. And when I work with a tenant, I'm working with a tenant, I'm trying to get you the best deal. So I always encourage that. And then start looking to find a space, you know, depends on when your lease is up, what's going on in the market. And then the next step, which I kind of didn't talk about, is to start the conversation with the landlord, is we use what's called a letter of intent. So you look at a space, you're like, this is it. So I kind of get from you what kind of term, we pretty much know what it's advertised at, what kind of tenant improvements you want. And then I draft a letter for my client saying, Mr. Landlord, Mrs. Landlord, you know, we want a 5-year lease. This is a starting lease rate, 3% annual increases. Would you put paint and carpet in there? And it's a non-binding letter, the tenant signs, it says, you know, it's like our first offer, to the landlord. And then we use that to negotiate, and once we kind of reach some terms, then we get all the legal language. That's how the process gets started. And then you're gonna read the lease when it comes, maybe have an attorney look at it, you're gonna sign it, and then depending on your dates, you're gonna take your occupancy. So that's kind of the process. Now, when it comes to buying commercial real estate, this is a little bit, how am I doing on time? Okay, I'm gonna talk fast. Just like I said, got a lot of stuff to tell you. So lots of property types you can buy. I know this is more of an owner occupied class, but when it comes to commercial real estate, these are like all the asset classes that I work in and that you can find commercial brokers that work in: hospitality, you know, golf courses. I put restaurants in there too, but lots of options of things that you can look at and buy.
Question, so
Sure.
back on that other side.
Yeah.
So there's zoning that goes with each one of those
Yes.
spaces, like, I mean, are you able, I mean, it'd be nice to be like, hey, zoning has to be this for that, zoning has to be.
Oh,
this.
yeah. Yes, yeah, so when I pull up a listing, the zoning's in there. It's also on the tax records that you can look up what zoning is. Some stuff is grandfathered in, you know, it was built as a house, and somebody added on, you know, another unit in the back, and so now maybe it's a duplex or something like that. But yes, the zoning, if that was permitted and everything, then the zoning still might be single family, even though it's grandfathered in now as a 2-unit. But yes, the zoning is all attached to that. Good question. So financing options, lots of options for financing. Of course, you know, talk to your lender. When it comes to owner occupied, you can use an SBA, the Small Business Administration loans, which can be as little as 10% down. Right now in this market, most of my clients are 15 to 20% down. Conventional financing generally starts at 20%. But what I tell people is talk lender, making close your ears, is talk to at least 3 lenders, because commercial financing, every bank has such different qualifications, different interest rates. At any time they're looking at their portfolio. During COVID, nobody was lending on restaurants. People didn't really want to lend on hotels. So you don't know, general public doesn't know, and you could get denied for your loan, and you're like, I have great credit, I've got cash in the bank, why did you deny me for a loan? Well, they denied you because they don't want the thing that you want to buy in their portfolio at that time. They don't tell you that. So now you've had 30 days to apply for a loan during your purchase period, and you get denied. So I tell people, start the process with 3 banks. You got your tax returns out already, you're filling out the applications, just spend half a day and do it. Because you don't know whether you're gonna get denied, even if you're a great borrower. You don't know what the interest rates always are gonna be, and you don't know what they're lending on at any given time. So that's always my first disclaimer. My business partner's been in the business 37 years. He's like, I can't believe you tell people that. And I'm like, but it's in your best interest as a borrower. Just like if you buy a home, you probably should also talk to a few lenders, because their interest rates, I mean, it's like 1/8% might be different, but they still all have different fees, and the same thing is for commercial. So sometimes in commercial is more common, especially now in this market, to do owner financing. You can purchase where the owner maybe will carry the note for you for 3 to 5 years. They usually say substantial down payment, negotiable, but I mean, they're not gonna carry a note for $5,000, right? So you still probably need some, you know, $50,000 depending on the price, but they'll carry the note, because maybe you're a new business and you don't have your tax returns to get a commercial loan, right? So you're like, I'm gonna do this business, so you let them carry it, and then you balloon out into financing when you've got the better tax returns and your P&Ls. I talked a little bit about SBA, and then there's also an SBA if you're a veteran. There's an SBA VA loan. Not every bank does them, so you have to call around, but there is that. And then hard money, of course, you can go like talk to somebody that's gonna charge you a lot of money for a hard money loan, but that is.
So I'm so sorry, I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
it's okay.
What's the difference between the, those 2 types of SBA? You have the 7A and the 504.
Yes. Correct me if I'm wrong. One is more for like capital improvements and like equipment if you're buying that as part of the loan, and one is more for the real estate. Does that sound about right, Megan?
I'm not a commercial lender,
Oh, okay.
however, I think you are
Okay.
correct.
Yes, and I can, if I get your information, I can send you the specifics on that. But one is like more packaging, you're the restaurant buying the building and you need extra equipment, and one is more for commercial real estate.
Yeah.
And SBA, the low down is only for owner occupied, and you have to occupy 51% of the building. So if you tell me I wanna buy like a 3-suite retail building, but I'm only gonna take this one, you cannot use an SBA unless you're gonna occupy 51% of that property or more. And that includes bathrooms and hallways and stuff like that, but, so I did kind of talk about that. Oh, here we go, look, I'm sorry, I'm always a little higher than what I think I'm gonna be. I'd say I like to talk, so, yeah, SBA as low as 10%, and then, yeah, hard money can be really, really expensive, not only with, their interest rate, but their points that they would charge you at the start of the loan, so those are just things you wanna make sure that you're paying attention to. So, yes, talk, cannot preach enough, 3 to 5 lenders. Talk to them, it's in your best interest for financing, very, very different. You know, if they don't want your property, they'll also say, you gotta put 40% down as an owner user, and you're like, oh, it's clear, you don't want me. You don't wanna lend me money, I understand now, you're making it so untenable. So then some things to ask when you're talking to them about financing, you know, obviously down payment, what's your amortization schedule? Are they doing it on a 20-year? Are they doing it on a 30-year? You know, understanding what your financing is. How long is the loan? Typically, you know, when you buy a house, you maybe have a 20 or 30-year note and you're good to go. Other than taxes and insurance increasing, your payments are generally the same. But not true in commercial, 5, 7, 10 years, you're gonna either have to refinance or they're gonna readjust your rate. So you don't know for 30 years that that's gonna be your payment, right? Banks are gonna get their money, their business too. So make sure you really understand what you're signing like this. Because right now, you might hear in the news, everybody's worried about the commercial market crashing next year because a lot of borrowers borrowed money when rates were at 2, 3, 5%. Now we're at 7, 8%. So their loans are recasting at their 5, 7, 10-year mark. And so that's why people are really worried about the commercial real estate market falling out, because a lot of banks right now are doing 1, 2-year deferrals, and everybody's saying 2025 is the year. But not a banker, but I do not think the banks are going to want to take back commercial buildings, right? And they don't want to get in the foreclosure business. So I personally think they're either going to keep giving people extensions or they'll raise their interest rates a little bit, but I don't think you're going to see some of these buildings go from like 5% to 10%. That's just, I don't see the market being able to handle that. So whether you're, yes, ma'am.
I was just gonna say, oftentimes with like startups or small businesses, they don't come to want a credit union until they actually need the loan. So my recommendation is if you are kind of like thinking about getting a loan in the next 18 months to 2 years down the road, come to the credit union, have a conversation, talk about your goals. It's really important, especially businesses that have a relationship with a financial institution, specifically a credit union. That's only going to benefit you further because it's not all black and white on paper.
It is not all black and white. And relationships really do help.
Yes.
For sure.
And do we need an appointment?
I think it would be ideal, yes.
So whether you're buying or leasing, I always encourage people, because again, if you're purchasing, the commission for the broker is typically also paid for by the seller. So it's no upfront out of pocket to have your own representation. Find your team, talk to your lender, build those relationships with your banker, and then have a commercial contractor too, because you know, most likely whether you're buying or leasing, the space is not going to be perfect for you.
Tax prepared.
Oh, your CPA, yeah. Yep, your CPA. Except, you know, when I first got in this business, side note, prospected CPAs for like their business. And what I find is most business owners do whatever they're gonna do and then they tell their CPA. So I really don't ever, it's probably same thing with financial advisors. I spent the money, help me now. No, it's like you ask for the advice after you already made the decision. So this is true. I should probably add that, but they don't really send me any business because people just make their own decisions. And then I'm always about taking action, right? So you know, you might find a space that you want to lease and maybe it doesn't work out with that landlord, but like bottom line is, you know, especially when it comes to buying, you know, is like taking action, and that process also can be a long time unless you're a cash buyer. Commercial loans, 90, 120, 180 days, especially if you're SBA. So you also need to be thinking about that. If your lease is coming up and you're like, I'm ready to buy, that process can be a long time. So thinking about that. So again, when it comes to purchasing, your timing, right? You don't expect, think in 30 days I can buy that building. Doesn't work that way in commercial. The zoning, making sure that you're buying a building you can operate out of. And if it needs a zone change because you're not in the right zoning, if you have to work with the government, it's a long time, it can take a long time depending on what their process is. And then permits and construction and all of that stuff, everything just takes a really long time. So, and then, yeah, when it comes to purchasing, like figuring out what you wanna buy for your business, what your budget is. Again, get your team and like, take action. Just go do it. You don't know what you don't know. Yes, ma'am.
So I already lease where I'm at,
Okay,
but I wanna buy the whole building.
okay.
And I happen to know that the person in the office next to me is on a month to month. So if I buy that building, is there any reason I can't ask them to leave?
No, you could ask them to leave. You could decide as a new owner, you could not renew their lease. But you have to.
They're on a month to month, no lease.
No, they just pay, they have nothing in writing,
They have no
even
lease.
on a,
No
well, they
lease.
could have a lease that like renews, no, nothing.
No
Oh,
lease.
Yeah, you could get rid of them.
I found out.
But you would need to be careful because I personally was under contract to buy a building in Clastonite. And we were under contract and like it was totally under market. And I was like, awesome, I'm gonna raise the rent on all these tenants. And then the damn landlord, the owner, but in contract, didn't even talk to me, renewed the leases at the same rate. And I was like, why would you do that? So I canceled the contract. I was like, the whole reason I was buying this was to bring it to market rate. And that's where my money was gonna come from. No. And I was like, it was a residential agent. I got so ticked with them and I was like, you didn't even talk to me. Like you didn't even ask me because you're renewing them at the same rate, which was so under market.
That was my
So,
next
so you just
question.
have to make sure
Can
that
I tell
you,
the
yes, put that in your.
owner not to?
Yes, you can put that in, you
sign a
can put that
lease?
in the writing, in the offer, like in writing, don't verbally tell them.
Right.
In writing, current owner will not do anything with the tenants without new buyer approving, or they just won't do it because,
Yeah,
yes.
don't do it.
Yeah, fortunately, I terminated the contract because I was like, dude, you totally, thanks.
Okay.
Yes, well, and of course the tenants saw what was coming, right?
Right.
They were like, oh, new owner's gonna raise the rent, it was exactly what I was gonna do, so they were.
Absolutely.
But, yeah, so everything in writing, make sure you're protected, yeah. Yeah. So, any other questions? Yes, sir.
I saw on a triple net, is there some sort of schedule that you look at to identify what's the average utility, what the average landscaping and stuff be? To help you figure out what your full rent's gonna be?
Yeah, so in the standard lease I use, it says that the tenant has the right to review and like audit them. I've never had a tenant ask for it during our lease negotiations, and to be honest, I don't know if tenants do.
Yeah.
Most likely they don't because they're too busy running their own businesses, but yes, you can ask for all of
When you
that.
wanna know that, cause that's gonna be like.
I would think so, yeah,
Rent really is gonna be.
Right.
Because added fees.
yes. Yeah, no, I agree, but I mean, I think landlords also, gentleman in the back could answer too, like, you don't wanna raise your triple nets from like $5 to $10 a square foot, because then your tenants are gonna throw a stink, right? And so I think a good landlord is kind of on a preventative maintenance schedule. You're not gonna do your HVAC and your asphalt resealing and a new roof like all in the same year. You would hope. You would hope that a landlord would be a little smarter than that. Or they would find a way, if it did need all that, if they bought the building, that they would figure out a way to like amortize that better for their tenants. But yeah, tenants should, but I don't have a lot of tenants.
And how'd you find out in that situation in Clastonite that they renewed the lease, like before you're ready to sign, did you get all the documents in front of you before you sign, including the current lease agreements, like, could you have somehow tried to slide that under and you wouldn't have noticed, like, how did you catch it?
When you get financing, the banks want it.
Okay.
They want copies of all the current leases and, by the law, the agent's supposed to disclose that they did it. So he's like, oh, hey, the landlord did this, and then he sent me the leases, and I'm just like, I can't even believe you did it without mentioning, hey, the landlord's going to do this, because I would have then said, I'm gonna terminate if the landlord does this, can we at least have a conversation about what they're doing? And I didn't even have the chance to do that, but yes, the bank would have caught it if I wouldn't have, because unless you're a cash buyer, the banks want everything. So lots of paperwork, and that's what I think a lot of people, I was actually talking to a commercial lender yesterday, and he's like, clients come in, they won't have an equipment loan, this and that, and he's like, they send me their business documents, here's my P and L, oh, a week later, here's my balance sheet. And so no lender's gonna look at anything until you give the package, so, you know, your loan can be processed as fast as you're responding to the long list of things that they want, you know, your personal tax returns, your business tax returns. And so, if you're like a lot of businesses, maybe you're not filing, you know, on April 15th, you're getting an extension. So a lot of lenders too will be like, well, you can't do much, you've gotta get your taxes done so we can do the loan. So a lot as a business owner to be responsible for sure.
Or
But-
1 minute overtime.
Oh, sorry, guys.
You're doing a good job. Very good.
I have some cards over there if you guys want my contact information, and I think we're gonna hang out afterwards. I'm happy to answer questions, but thanks, guys.
Thank you.
I obviously enjoy what I do, so thank you.
Yeah, very knowledgeable. I learned a lot. Thank you all for coming. Anytime that you'd like to speak with one of our advisors, let us know. And then our next class will be AI for business. So we will have a speaker from Portland Community College, and he's a professional and small business advisor. And he's gonna be talking about how to prompt AI well, all the different kinds of tools, how you can use ChatGPT in all these different ways for business. And then the last half an hour, I'll be presenting about Canva's tools, those AI tools they're offering, give people a tour of Canva and other imaging processing softwares to look into. So if you're interested in how to use AI for your business, feel free, it's gonna be on Zoom.
I see that it's Zoom only. Are you, if we register for it, will you send us the link later?
Yes.
Both Susanna and I will be picking people up at the airport during that time.
Yeah.
But it's something that I think she
Yeah.
would like to know. Okay.
Yeah, all classes are also recorded, so they will be posted on YouTube, so.
So we need to, but we should register
Yes.
for it, like attending it, so we get that information, correct?
Yes, absolutely. Cool, thank you all for coming, and let us know if you have more questions.
Awesome.
And grab food and drinks on your way out.